All right, we're back, and I brought a friend.
Yeah, call in a friend. Call in help. Apparently, I'm not a unique card.
This is episode 44B, the Prime episode. So 44A led into this, and 44B is now us back in action. So
Driven to drinking at this rate.
I kind of want to just reach to the screen and grab that beer. Now, Tom, when last we left you, sir, you were at starting a discussion about, we were talking about the state of the meta right now, which is a conversation I wanted you and me to share with everybody.
Okay.
And you had started your topic with regards to how potent Nick Fury is in this already gigantic meta.
Yeah, especially from the perspective that he costs 5 points to shut down a power. It was really, that's just the thing that kind of gets me, is the fact that you can bring him in, even if the Shield level 7 ID card wasn't, or rather, if it was unique, then at least you can only do it once per game. But as it is, the ability to call in at any given moment 5 points for somebody to shut down a power is kind of the last straw. In a way, it's so inclusive. It simply says, choose a power they can use, now they can't. It's almost hilariously inclusive. We used to make jokes like that, like when you got a new piece and it's like, oh, what does that special power do? I'm like, oh, I just get to choose something you can do and now you can't. Like, we would make jokes like that across the table. Now that joke is for real. And with Nighthawk Prime, that joke's for real too. It's like, you know, the gag of, what does that guy do? Oh, it means that all of your perplexes go away. All right, so, ha ha ha. And we all laugh because they never make a figure like that. It's like what I was saying about Black Swan is the other joke figure. It's like, take a power action and win the game. And then they actually made one that did it. But with Black Swan, it is balanced. And in fact, I love Black Swan so much. She's one of my favorite figures, and not even for that power. I think she's great. That's a tangent. The point that I was trying to get to was that as far as the state of the meta goes, it's so wide open that there's a counter for absolutely everything now. And it's so easy to counter so much. For 5 points, you can take away any power that somebody has. For 65 points, you can take away all their stat mods. This is in addition, of course, to what the orange and yellow, or rather the orange and green batteries are already doing to lock you down. Felix Faust is locking you down, although obviously that's not in the rock meta, but it's still one of those things. It goes back, I was saying on this show a few weeks ago, when we were talking about Felix Faust and how it felt justified that he be banned from the rock, that it creates a negative play experience when you take things away from your opponent. And between Nick Fury and Nighthawk Prime, we've had two major new entries into the list of figures and effects that just take things away. So that not only does it counter so much, but it actually becomes a bit more of a negative play experience. And that, in addition to the enormous back catalog of what we have, has created a surplus of choice. There's simply too much. And some people would argue the fact that every team can be countered is a good thing. And I would agree that every team having a counter is a good thing. I think there's just too many counters, and it's too much to the point where I can't confidently build a team to think that it has a good way of dealing with any large majority of the field. It's who you happen to be paired against in a given match is that element of luck is just another random element that has a huge impact over the outcome of the final tournament, to the point where I think it's disproportionately in favor of lucky pairings over good building, I think.
Right.
In the current state of the meta, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that when it gets to a meta that's too big can become problematic. Now, at the same time, it's that whole idea you can counter argue with the wide open meta is that, well, then it becomes about matchups. But then when it's too close, it's, well, everybody's playing the same thing. You can't get everybody to win.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a sweet spot is required, and I think that we've overshot the sweet spot at this point.
Yeah, and part of that is the fact that the meta is so massive right now. I want to say massively big, but it's just big. And an extra year added into Modern, it made for too much. Now, I might be on panic mode right now, and for all I know, they might just before Nationals decide, you know what, you're right, it is a little too big. Let's cut before Nationals this year. And I'd be okay with that because that gave us a large amount of time with this extra size Modern, and then gave us that whole, okay, just before competition, now we have our actual cut line, which would be fantastic. Because, shrinking a meta is like shrinking the number of figures is a control point where if there's too much going on, then there's too many wildcard variables as far as the game is concerned. And it's the idea that I'm trying to come up with as well with with a tournament setting that I want to create, where if you limit the figures harshly and mail everybody, then you actually find out who is the player in the end of it. Now, granted, you can't do that when you want to allow the whole collection of figures into the game. So, of course, WizKids wants to run a full-blown modern meta nationals, which makes a great deal of sense. So that said, yes, the meta is varied, but it's also full of a whole lot of figures that are just hard answers to a little too much in some cases. Now, Nighthawk Prime himself, he kind of makes you go look at your team and say, can I do this without relying on the modifiers? And that's part of building a solid team as well. And this is something I do actually have to do a Metafix episode on, and it's, with my Hawk Prime existing. But understand that what his power does is it stops you from increasing your powers. It does not stop me from decreasing your powers.
No. Totally.
And understand how PD and Hydra work now, guys, and then you understand what you what options exist, right? And Nighthawk Prime creates a thing where you have to think a little bit outside the box. Perplex still works.
Yeah.
You have to use it in a different manner now. And that's another thing. Like, so as far as Nighthawk Prime is concerned, okay. Now Nick Fury himself, he still only drops a power from one character, which is, if you ask me why do I constantly build teams with 4 or 5 figures on them, it's so that Outwit doesn't shut down my entire team. An Outwit or a cancel a power isn't going to stop my team. It's going to stop a character. Okay, I leave that character behind and keep going with the rest of them. You've still got problems to deal with, right? So, I mean, stylistically, I panic a lot less when things like this exist, right?
True.
And that's that. It opens up another thought, another group of thought, right? And we might actually see a resurgence of large numbers of figures in order to deal with the Nick Fury problem. We might see a resurgence of the Red Lantern teams that were very, very apparent in existence when Animal Red Lantern existed, and maybe not having Alyosha might not be such a bad thing anymore. It's one of those things where we see the Nick Fury and people use the Nick Fury and I don't blame them because it's a good figure.
Oh yeah.
Right? But nobody is thinking how to get around it or how to make it not be as big an issue.
Well, I think people are thinking that. I would argue that is present in people's thoughts already. When you say, maybe we'll see people moving towards this or that, I would agree that we'll see some of that. I guess the point that I'm wondering about is, has the meta become so large that we won't really see trends as such at all? With so many options out there, then there's so many different ways to solve for so many different problems, which themselves have problematic matchups as well, that there actually is no trending. And then that's what I wonder whether we're getting to, because I look at the results of these tournaments as they're coming in one after another, and it's not just that something different is winning. It's that the top 8s and the top 16s look nothing like each other. Within each other and as compared to each other, we're getting the most diverse teams ever. And I would never have thought that I would say that was a bad thing. But no trending at all kind of feels like people just throwing shit against the wall and being lucky if it sticks. It's not even like if it sticks, we'll keep with it. It's like every shit is unique, and so the possibility of sticking is entirely based on whatever else happens to be on the wall at that time. This is really a disgusting analogy, and I'm sorry.
I appreciate the analogy, believe me.
but that is it. When there's no trending at all, I worry that we've overshot that sweet spot that we were talking about. And that is my concern right now, is that I feel like it's so random that it is really building teams, and what you bring to the table feels like you really are just rolling a dice before you even sit down and start rolling dice.
And, when you say that, Tom, I do have to remind you that you and me have this strategy of building teams of throwing science at the wall and seeing what sticks.
That's true.
So Does that mean you and me are going to be in the finals for nationals this year?
Well, I'm sure that we'll be in competition. I don't know if it'll be the finals.
No, you know what's going to happen, Tom? It's going to be in that bubble match where it's like one of us wins and one of us loses, and now one of us goes on, and then the world is going to explode when we collide in that match.
Yeah, it's like when the mega powers exploded, but with less of the world watching.
It's when the mediocrity bubble hits.
Yeah, yeah. It's like as opposed to mega powers, it's like when the minor powers collide, brother.
You know what they say about the meek inheriting the earth? Well, nobody knew what we were going to do with that power. But yes, there is a lot less hard science in regards to building, and that's it affects two types of players. It affects the type of player, there's types of players like you and me who are build a team, think of as many possible matchups that we can possibly come up with, and then if there is something that beats us, know that we can play around it.
Yeah.
That becomes the best style, whereas a lot of the time it's, can I plan on what's going to show up and play against that? And that becomes a very dangerous strategy as far as going to something in the high end like a Nationals or Worlds or Rocktober, which is coming up very shortly. And when you go to an area where the meta is multiple zones, you can't plan for those. You can't plan on what's going to show up. You know what I can tell you is going to show up? Nick Fury. How is he going to show up? That's only 120 points of a team, right? So it's very hard to predict what you're going to be up against in Rocktober. So your best strategy comes, what has the most answers to generic things as opposed to specific figures? Look at the generic level.
Yeah, I would agree.
Right? Yeah, it's like think of a thing that could be a problem, manage that problem.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, I expect to see a lot of Nick Furies with indigo batteries. I just expect that.
Yeah, they work together quite nicely. I expect to see Nick Fury, but this may be just me, and I might be completely out to lunch. I expect to see Nick Fury gradually becoming more and more of a figure sitting on top of a level 7 ID card. He is fantastic, but he's soft enough that I feel like, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the fact that the ID cards themselves are not unique, you could have multiple Nick Furies on your sideline, couldn't you?
No. Here's the thing and Amber, we got both ideas coming at me. The level 7 ID card does say that another character can't have the same name or something, or can't be the same character with regards to it. I have to pull it up now because I know there's a stipulation where you can't have two 120-point Nick Furies on your sideline. Okay. You can have one on the board and one on the sideline, I believe.
If that's the case, then that's not as bad. I still do expect that, again, we will see him gravitating towards that area, if no other reason that he frees you up 115 points. He has a very specific function, and you can very much build for that function, but I feel you can do other things with those 115 points for the times that you're not specifically using that function. That doesn't mean we won't see him. I like the balance. The Quinjet team is a great example of that. It has a Nick Fury when it needs one. I don't think a lot of teams can have a Nick Fury when they need one. And then there are some teams that will just have the Nick Fury all the time. And so he'll be there. But, I mean, there's a lot of things that'll be there. It's not like he arrives and ruins the meta. I've always been a little bit annoyed, and it's funny because I'm falling into this trap, and so I apologize to all of you out there in video land, because I've always disliked people who see the new hotness, and then their immediate reaction is, the game is now broken and we can never play again. That sort of extreme overreaction has been an absolute tenement of the Heroclix game for as long as it's existed since Firelord. It's a lot of fuss and bother over what we're ultimately not as much as we would like to think it is.
People say Nick Fury is broken, and I just want to compare that to a 10-range Superman with hypersonic and a Firelord who is carried by a Wasp and can use range combat expert after that with a printed 3 damage and 13 attack, I believe he had. And
great.
And a meta with a Ghost Rider that could choose any click with the prep time of the utility belt, with a Heroes for Hire team ability that allowed you to just take an extra action as a free action. That's broken.
Yep. Well, I always go back to structural integrity feel, will bury myself in the corner and win because my team has fewer points than yours. That's broken. Like, that's a problem with game design. We are not living through the age of problematic game design. We're just living through the age of so much in the game that people like you and I, who don't like to build as much, to think, look at all the cool things my team can do, but look at all the cool things my team can counter. Eventually, it outpaces us, and so people like us tend to have sour grapes about it.
Yeah.
Well, I do anyway.
You know what? I just like to, at this point, I'm at the point of I don't want to counter my opponent's team anymore. I just want to counter the terrain between us. and that's exactly the plan of Police Brutality 2.0. Was the idea was I choose Ryu.
No.
But yes, okay, so the shield level 7 card, the stipulation is that each copy of this ID card added to your force must choose a different character with a different name.
I see.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if you have 2 shield level 7s, you awesome person, you can't have 2 Nick Furies of any kind of the same type. So, now, one of the things you brought up the Quinjet as being an option to bring out the Nick Fury, and that Nick Fury is going to stick around.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Like, if you've managed to deal with any kind of ignore terrain characters, now you've got a Nick Fury who's sticking around, and it's one action at a time, but every turn he's going to take a free, he's going to take a shot, and then the next turn he's going to rest, but he's still going to cancel a power. So there's a lot of ways for this Nick Fury to come in. So he's a figure now that's on your radar. But when it comes to the generic thought of it is Nick Fury has stealth. How do you deal with stealth? Nick Fury has 18 defense. How do you usually deal with 18 defense? Nick Fury has 6 clicks. How do you deal with a character with 6 clicks? Right? Those are your options. Characters with 9 range have existed in the past. Characters that ignore elevated have existed since Deadpool. I mean, Banshee hasn't. He's good. Banshee is great. He hasn't been wrecking as hard as he could be.
No, he's awesome. And for a while, everybody wanted to quit the game because of Banshee. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it is one of those things where there was an awful lot of talk of what do we do now that this exists, and it's the same talk we're having for Nick Fury. He doesn't deserve quite as much weight as we're giving him, but he is the current hotness. Mm-hmm. It'll be very interesting to see how much he gets played, and if indeed we do head into a no tactics climb out in the near future, which I certainly hope we do, because it's fun, it mixes things up. Then I'll be interested to see how people take advantage of that and what figures reemerge. We've had a lot of figures hit the market in the period of heavy tactics that I feel like people are going to come up with some interesting surprises that we don't see coming, and it'll be really neat to see how it goes down. That's the nice thing about the game. It springs eternal in that respect.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of turtle, F that guy.
You didn't say springs eternal. I believe I said springs eternal, but yes.
Oh, I thought you said turtle.
No, I'm down with him though.
Springs eternal. All right. So the next thing we actually wanted to talk about, and Tom, you've been begging me to talk about this for the past little while.
You bet.
Is our top 5 standard powers.
Woo!
So now you obviously have your own, and I'm actually kind of writing mine down because I know most of what they are. I just have to get them on paper. So you give us a start while I'm typing this all out for myself.
All right. Well, I actually haven't thought about it as much as it might seem. I just thought it would be cool to go around and hear what everybody says, partly because it's another opportunity to be positive about the game, and just to see. I'm just interested to see what people like most. In this case, the way I've defined my top 5 in this case is what I think. Here's exactly how I came up with this. First of all, this is the Metal Lab, so we're kind of talking about things that make your team better. I can give you, for example, I love Force Blast more than any other power I think in the game, but it's not going to be in my top 5 because ultimately my top 5 is devoted to what I think are the most effective powers, and I love Force Blast as much, but I don't think it will be on there. And then if you put it at number 2, then we'll talk about it when we get there. What I kind of thought it was this. Let's say that I was making a resource, and the resource said, it had a list of powers. There were 5 powers listed and said, roll a d6 to up your turn for this character. It can use the power for that number, and if you roll a 6, you get to choose. Then I would say, what 5 powers would I want on that hypothetical resource? That's kind of how I was thinking about it. So for me, I grouped them by categories and then gave my favorites in each category. My number 5, if we want to go that, if we want, I could do it as a countdown. My number 5.
We're doing top 5 Rockstar style, eh?
Yeah, you betcha, baby.
Right.
So my number 5 would be my favorite and I think the most effective move and attack power in the game, which is hypersonic speed. I think I wouldn't question it myself. It's not as compatible with things, obviously, as charge and running shot, but nothing beats the ability to take a hit and then swing around a corner. The ability to keep moving. The fact that it now does have a power that works with it in Precision Strike. I mean, there are other powers, obviously, that do. One that directly works with it as an offense power that can live on a different place in your dial. It's good for closer range combat as need be. I mean, hypersonic speed kind of speaks for itself, but I wouldn't rank it any higher because I frankly, as far as overall effectiveness, I don't think it outranks some of the other things that are out there. But it is my number 5. What about you?
My number 5 is actually a tie because they're both the same power, and that is running shot and charge. Now, while you like hypersonic has the unfortunateness of halving my range. Now, running shot and charge gives you a little bit more of a positional advantage, and it gets you to the place that you want to be in any case. Hypersonic, if a lot of cases you have characters with, let's say, sorry, I don't have my face on the main camera. A lot of the time, you don't have a character. Let's say it's a character who can only use a close combat attack. Plasticity is going to stop that character. I like running shot and charge because that's not a stopping element of these powers. It's just something that these powers can, still do things afterwards. And they're my setup powers. Most of the time I look at a character. Most of the time I look at a character and say if they don't have like a running shot or a charge, I feel like they're not going to get to do what they want to do. And they're also my favorite powers because I just, I like controlling the pace. Because that's another thing. These two powers control the tempo because you get to hold back with these powers in the background. And then when your opponent is in a position that you can get to, then you can use those powers to explode in their face.
That's true, but I wouldn't necessarily it's only in certain circumstances do you outswing somebody with running shot as opposed to hypersonic. Hypersonic also has the benefit of being able to potentially be used for more than one offensive purpose. As we say, with charge, you run in and you hit somebody as hard as you can, and then you're locking them down, probably, providing you didn't knock them back or something like that. Or with running shot, you get into position to take the shot and be ready to take the shot next time. Whereas with hypersonic, I can come in and hit this guy, then go down and tie down this guy. So I can use it to both have an attack component and a control component within the same action for different figures. I mean, charge does that for one figure, or potentially a crowd, depending upon how you position. I don't know. It's hard to obviously it's all preferential, but I think it's interesting that you went with the other two move and attack powers. If sidestep is not considered a move and attack power, if that's fair to say, then we've covered the gamut between us, but we're on different sides of that fence.
Well, I think one of the other things too about running shot and charge is I like to use my other powers too because that came with them. So I can charge and quake. I can running shot and Psy Blast or energy explode or everything. Not everything. I mean, there's range combat expert or close combat expert are both kind of the stop and goes. But I can exploit weakness with Psy Blast. I can flurry, or I can. There's other things I can do with running shot. But that's like I like that extra option because hypersonic you kind of limited to just precision strike or steel energy
or super strength
or super strength if you happen to have it. But you get a lot more open options as far as charge and running shot are concerned. But again, you're limited to a half movement, so you kind of have to force your position. And both have a lot of merits. Let's just say that.
I think so. And I'm still going to take a small bit of pride in saying that's technically two powers. I think the sum of charge and running shot might be as good as hypersonic, but I don't think either one individually is. All right, number 4.
Number 4, and now. If you asked me this question 10 years ago, or if you got 10 years ago 10 years ago Jason sitting next to me right now,
there he is.
And saying I just chose his power, he'd probably punch me. And that power is Battle Fury. Now, 10 years ago, Battle Fury sucked. 10 years ago, Battle Fury said you can't be carried and you can't be mind controlled.
And you can't make range combat attacks.
Yeah. And you can't make range combat attacks. Those penalties still exist. But now this also ignores shape change, and this character can't be incapacitated.
Yeah, it's super good.
What happened? And nobody carries anybody anymore anyway. We all TK each other.
Well, the shape change thing alone is a huge feature in the game now, because shape change is just being given out like candy. I can remember when shape change was a comparative rarity, because at the time I think the designers were still not exactly sure exactly what it does. They kind of were like, well, I guess it's kind of like for people who change costumes sometimes, maybe. And so they would throw it out there, but nowhere near as liberally as they were throwing around things like super senses or any of the damage reduction powers. But now it's everywhere.
Yep, absolutely. And because it's everywhere, Amber is rolling it.
Yeah.
I can have none of this.
I get that.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
No. So Battle Fury does make my list on a regular basis nowadays, because, and as well, if you go back to the Brother Voodoo days, or any day where mind control is still an option as a power, and now mind control can be used with charge and running shot if you happen to get this combination of powers somehow.
Yep.
Battle Fury says, no.
Yeah.
Not on my watch.
Remember the old Jean Grey, who was the only one who could do it? Age of Apocalypse Jean Grey was the only one who used to be able to do that, and now everybody can do it.
Yeah. Yep.
But Battle Fury says no. It's a good one. It's not on my list, but it wouldn't, like, it would be in my top 10, I presume, not in my top 5. Yep. My number 4, my number 5 was my favorite move and attack power. Number 4 is my favorite, shall we say, offensive power, which I don't. At this point, I think it is overpowered, and I frankly think since it was first introduced, it did too many things, and that's Precision Strike. It may appear on your list. I don't know, but we'll see. I would never. I always thought Psychic Blast was too much, partly because I play so many Hulks. You get really frustrated with seeing Psychic Blast all the time. You always come away from your matches grumbling, like, Super Psychic Blast is overpowered. My Hulk should be able to stand up to that. But honestly, Precision Strike just does so much. It's ridiculous. The ability to completely get around Super Senses and Mastermind, make your damage something that can't be reduced below 1, combined with the fact that it works from close range, or it works at range, and it works in conjunction with any time you make an attack as opposed to an action. So it's activated by free attacks, or things like hypersonic speed and stuff like that. It is unbelievably versatile. The only reason it's not higher on the list is ultimately because it still can't get around absolutely everything. Hint, hint. But what may be ahead, and I do think that it speaks for itself in terms of sheer offensive inclusiveness. If I could only have one attack power for the rest of my HeroClix days, I'm pretty sure that this would be it. Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what's your number 3, Tom?
My number 3, it segues nicely off the last one, because as we say, your damage cannot be reduced below 1, or with Precision Strike, it reduces it'll get past reducers from the perspective that 1 still gets through. It goes completely past Super Senses. It goes completely past Mastermind. Your aforementioned Battle Fury gets completely around Shape Change, but nothing in this game gets around Invincible. And I do think besides obviously witting it, that presumes that you can do that. These days, about half the powers that you get in the game these days can't be outwitted, thanks to all the powers you're getting from your resources, from your entities, from your traits, from other effects granted from off the board, or from the ID card character standing next to you, da-da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, that's a tangent. The point is, like, outwit is an amazing power too, and that's a discussion for another time, maybe.
10 years ago. That guy from 10 years ago who wanted to punch me for Battle Fury, we can talk to him about it.
Yeah. But honestly, Invincible, ever since they first introduced it, it's another one of these ones where, unlike Precision Strike, it doesn't create any bad feeling within me, because the damage is still getting through. In fact, circumstantially, it might not be as good as Impervious. But in a lot of other circumstances, it certainly is as good and better. It's an incredibly effective power, and I just love the fact that it takes away the incredibly hard first hit that KOs your character before you can do anything. I like that balancing factor. So for that alone, my apologies. For that alone, Invincible is my opinion the third best power in the game.
I kind of ranked it as my favorites and not necessarily the best, because I don't always play with the best. I just play with card powers I know how to use. And one of those powers I happen to know how to use very well is Energy Explosion.
Ooh, yeah.
And
where's 10 year ago Jason? It's a good thing he's not in the room, really, with the list.
Yeah, I know.
anymore.
That guy wants to beat the crap out of me right now. A lot of the powers I really like, they got this gigantic boost recently with the I guess it was the 2013 rules change. Where every kind of went, woo, hey,
well, much of the aforementioned Force Blast again, but yeah, energy explosion. Say more. Say on.
Yeah, energy explosion. Ever since the addition of the extra damage on splash based on your printed lightning bolts, I've been in love with the power, especially now that you can combine it with such things as Precision Strike or Psychic Blast or any other such powers that are part of a ranged combat action, because energy explosion, like like Blades, Claws, and Fangs, has actually become a passive portion of a ranged combat action. So as long as you're making a ranged combat action, not attack, ranged combat action, you can actually add energy explosion on top of that. So now, energy explosion can be added on top of Psychic Blast. It can be added on top of a Pulse Wave, which is confusing at first, but it's pretty cool.
Cool. It's not confusing at first. It's confusing every time you do it, but it is cool.
Yeah. And I've actually now figured out how the rules on it work, because there was an article they released, and it was they had like, these are the dangers of it. Like, wait, there's dangers of it? No, I'm not going to bother. Now I understand how it works, and it's disgusting. But yeah, so energy explosion just it became so potent, and there's sources that give it to you now. Like the flame blast ring is just like, you're gonna give me energy explosion? Okay.
Yeah, and there's sources of extra bolts now that we never used to have. Again, the power plant or the Thor ID card. Like, it's cool that you can now get extra bolts. Yeah, that's neat.
Now, granted, they don't add to the damage, but they do add to the directionality of it. Mm-hmm. And one of the, like, if you target it correctly, you can do a lot of damage with it, with a good solid energy explosion. So based on just the damage output of it on its own, because it's dealing its full damage in the first shot, and then it's dealing this extra little bit of splash here and there that you kind of want it to be dealing, I say bring on the Ultron Drone Swarm. Yep. I got a Rocket Raccoon with a Flame Blast ring ready for you.
Yeah, I've got my Isaac ready. Just make sure you don't have a Nighthawk Prime so that I'm down to that 9 attack that Isaac doesn't want to show anybody. He's not proud of that.
All right. My number 2 is your number 4, I believe, in Precision Strike.
Yes.
When it first came out, it was my number 1. But my number 1 has changed because I find myself so often just looking for that power on Figure My Team, and I will get to that when we talk about it. But Precision Strike stops super senses, and since you've talked at length about it already, because it stops super senses, and I'm married to Amber, that's why I love Precision Strike. If you've ever heard me interviewed on other shows too, I give the exact same story. Is I love Precision Strike because I'm married to her.
Yeah. Well, a couple of turns ago, you loved Battle Fury for kind of the same reason. So I think it's just Amber and rollouts are a hang up for you.
Ask her to roll a 9. You need a 9. You shouldn't be able to hit that. The odds are against you 100% of the time. But goddamn, if she needs a 7, she can't hit that. So anyway, Tom, what's your number 2 power?
My number 2 power for the entire history of my playing of HeroClix up until about a year or a year and a half ago was my number 1. I've always fallen back. This is a great example of a power. When I first started playing the game, I misunderstood how this power worked. I thought that it was literally half as effective as it was, and because I was playing only at home with my buddies, and we still agreed that it was, I think, the best power in the game. And then we found out that not only could you use probability control on your own turn or your opponent's turn, you could actually do it on both. And probability control is so good. There's a lot of defenders of Perplex out there who say that it's as good as probability control and point to probability charts, but probabilities get a bit more difficult to calculate once you take multiple rolls into consideration. The fact that you're only going to be rolling more than a certain number in the event that you need it. But the long and the short of it is that by and large, probability control is far better for catching those outlier rolls than just for nudging you a little bit in this direction or that direction if you just need a little bit. Admittedly, Perplex is great for a little bit of control over the outcome of a particular dice roll, but nothing beats the ability to say that crit miss didn't happen, or get that one, or for that matter, your crit hit didn't happen. or just get that second shot at a 4. I just need a 4, and you roll a 3. The probability control is security that it takes so much of a load off your mind knowing it's there every time you roll the dice. And I mean, Heroclix can be a stressful game. We drink for a reason, and so anything that takes away some of the stress and the need to be driven to the bottle is good for our long-term health. So that's the best reason for probability control. It's good for your health, and it's the second best power in the game.
Yeah. You know what? Because you asked for standard powers, I wasn't allowed to say Rocket Raccoon's version of probability control because it's actually just it takes the good power and says better.
Yeah.
But just incrementally. I didn't put probability control on my list, not because it's not a favorite, and it's a power I know I gotta have. And after years and years of relying on that power, it becomes work.
It's true.
Right? It's like, does my team have prob? Well, I'm gonna lose if I don't.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. If it's a given, then it's definitely one of the best powers in the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, which is probably why I didn't make my list. It's definitely an honorable mention on my list. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. So what's your number one, Tom?
Well, like I said, it was probability control up until about a year to a year and a half ago, and then it got to a breaking point for me in the meta because, and again, this list is made in light of this being the meta lab and talking about meta things. I mean, certainly, again, my top 5 favorite powers would be a little different probably. But anyway, still there?
Yep.
Okay. About a year and a half ago, I reached a breaking point where I realized it's no longer possible to just outwit your defense and assume I'll get around it, because your defense is coming from your entity, and your shape change is coming from your resource, and your stat bonuses are coming from the guy who's looking through the other guy who's located back in the starting area. And the ID character you just brought in is giving you another power in case I manage to get around the first power. And then because you've got defend from this other guy who's giving it from his entity to give a 20 defense over here, that applies before all your modifiers. And it's so freaking confusing that there's no way in the world I will ever hit if I don't use Pulse Wave.
I was going to say, it's Pulse Wave, you bastard.
because Pulse Wave is our rallying call for a reason. It has taken over for me as the go-to power, and I understand now, because for a lot of people it always was, and I always used to say, like, yeah, Pulse Wave's fine, but it's pretty limited. If your opponent can position adequately, it can be very difficult to get off the single target Pulse Wave that you really want to get real damage through, and pinging them for 1 damage doesn't seem like a lot. This was also an argument made back when dials tended to be a bit longer, but at this point, with so much riding on any individual dice roll, the game, again, dials are shorter, but numbers are enormous. And in this game, one attack, one way or the other, makes all the difference. And when that happens, I don't want to have to figure out whether my outwit is taking away your probability control to reroll, or your damage reduction, or your shape change, or your defend, or your perplex. I'd rather just get around all of it.
Yep. You know what? I'm not gonna lie. Pulse Wave was a consideration, but I have a fear level with Pulse Wave, and part of that fear level is that probability control. I am marred by my experiences in the game, and decades of more than a decade of experience in this game has told me your dice rolls are gonna let you down when you don't want them to let you down.
Yeah.
And because of Pulse Wave's range cut, it made its way to power 6 on my list.
Yeah.
And power 1 on my list was Psychic Blast.
Yep.
And the reason for that is the safety bubble. I do prefer to have that extra little bit of range on the right characters and just maintain distance. Because if I have to force my opponent towards me with the Psychic Blast, I can still be in a position that's relatively safe in a lot more situations. But of course, the output on Pulse Wave is it kind of takes what I'm trying to do with the Psychic Blast and just exponentially makes it greater. And that half range in a lot of cases can make it worth it a lot more often. So if you see me using Pulse Wave, it's usually the late game. I don't tend to lead in with it, because if it doesn't go off, then you still got full click characters about to smash your face. But yes, I do agree. I do have to agree that Pulse Wave is a great power. I don't rate it as high in my playing as I do with Psychic Blast myself.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, when I made this list, I was like, what are my 5 favorites? And then there's the workhorse powers, and if I must rate the best powers, then by far you got the top 2 correct, and that would be probability control and pulse wave.
Yeah. If I had to do my favorite 5 powers very quickly, it's hard to say. I think my favorite power in the whole game at this point is probably invincible, because again, I don't love being one-shotted by just enormous damage. Who does, really? But just when numbers truly get ridiculous, particularly from a damage perspective, then it breaks the game a little bit for me. But Force Blast would definitely be on my list in my top 5, because I just love it. No one sees it coming. It's the most underutilized power, which is why the Bulldozer is my favorite construct. You just never see it. And admittedly, counter to that, Shape Change would be in my top 5 too, as far as favorites, because again, people plan for your damage reduction, but they rarely plan for that re-roll as much as Super Senses and other things.
Yeah.
So,
I can't tell you how often I do look at that Paranormal Investigator these days. Like, do I just get around that Shape Change? Is the 40 points worth it? Is that a wick gonna do anything?
Sidestep's a great thing for the game too, as well. It is, in fact, it's so good that I know that this is not practical at this point in the game with its construction, but I almost wonder when they introduced it whether it wouldn't have been cool to just introduce it as an effect for the game. So not as a new power, but simply an option that any character can do. It would have been interesting to see if everybody could sidestep, what would happen? It becomes this. I love moving around. When a game eventually just locks itself down to a rolling contest in the middle of the map, that's when the game becomes less interesting. Really, it's more fun to deploy a team, and you try to use them strategically and move them strategically. And the more you're moving around and stuff, the better the game is. And ever since Sidestep was introduced, it's opened it up in that way. So I would say it's another one of it's a favorite.
Yeah, I think when you say it, like, if everybody has it, then it does nothing to it though. Because if everybody's taking a free action and move 2 squares, I use it to get away. Well, I just use it to get back to you.
I don't know. I don't think it would be quite that straightforward, because being locked down doesn't always suit everybody. But we're afraid to break away to take a whole action just to fail on a 50% chance.
Yep.
But Sidestep, anyone's willing to take that chance, and
absolutely. It's just kind of it's a side effect of like, I have Sidestep, I'm breaking away.
Yeah, well, it's great. I love the fact that it opens it up that way. Yeah. Anyway,
so that said, the next thing, you know what? Before I forget about it, we got to talk about our teams this week.
Let's do it.
Miss Arrowette.
Yeah.
Now you had your team built since last week.
Yep.
Because of a miscommunication, I believe, on my part. So if you want to take the lead on it this week.
Sure. Let me just bring it up here.
All right.
I'm going to attempt to screen share this. Can you see the Phoenix Force there?
I can. Brilliant.
Okay, so it's important to start with the Phoenix Force because it's important to remember a few things when I talk about this team. Firstly, a general disclaimer. This is one of the few times where we talk about building a team with one of these LEs where I get really excited about the idea of playing it. I don't know if this is the most competitive team, but I feel like this would be so much fun because it's like a modern take on a classic Swiss Army team. Or partial swarm type team, and it just seems like the most fun option for me. If I get a hold of Miss Arrowette, I will almost certainly play this team because it's big fun. So, starts with the Phoenix Force. It's important to remember it's on the second unit. That's the one I'm currently mousing over. So we're starting with charge, +1 attack, and toughness, and I'm keeping the Colossus fragment on most of the time to give invulnerability. I know that's redundant to the toughness, and sometimes you'll want to bring a different fragment on, but ultimately, everyone on this team could use the invulnerability. And so with everyone having charge, +1 attack, and invulnerability, just keep that in mind. We move on. Obviously, we've got Miss Arrowette. I really like Miss Arrowette. 7 range, running shot, 10 attack with her incapacitate, and willpower on a 17 with 3 damage to be able to break through whatever reducers you've got. And, of course, she brings in bowstring at the beginning of the game. Out pops a little low defense defend with support is always a nice thing. Still needs to roll 7, mind you, but it's okay. And enhancement is great for helping out Miss Arrowette. Can't be carried by Miss Arrowette, but that's fine. Just deploy them together. Also, should mention, because it's a Phoenix Force, they can all use poison and they can all fly. That's also important to remember.
Yep.
I'm giving the Cyclops fragment to Miss Arrowette. That is the ability to use range combat expert. So again, you look at this Miss Arrowette, you see her opening stats, and you imagine her +1 attack, 11 attack, and she's got RCE when she needs it. So she could go up to a 13 attack. She could hit her 11 attack for a 5 damage, or in between. It opens her up quite a bit, I think, and it's a nice pairing. I like it when things work together nicely like that. Next on this swarmy team, if that was my primary range attacker, then this is my harassment piece, and it is Johnny Quick. As we talked about before, we in Canada love our Johnny Quick. Showed up quite a bit. We've talked a lot about the fact that it showed up quite a bit back at Canadian Nationals. What I don't think you and I have ever addressed before, though, is that it's not like we talked about it. You and I hadn't talked at all in advance of Canadian Nationals, nor had some of the other people that were there with it. It just it came out and everybody agreed. This is, and independently came to the conclusion that he was awesome, was going to be on our team. So
I think you might be talking about Windsor.
That's what I meant to say. Yes, exactly, Windsor. Yeah, so anyway, Johnny Quick's great. I like him because you don't need to use his supercharge effect for him to be effective. He's got some prob, and he's a great little hypersonic harasser, and the fact that he ignores characters and hindering, he gets around the plasticity that would normally be the death knell of a close combat hypersonic speeder in the modern game. If you can get his pump up stats effect off, then he becomes a beast with a potential 14 movement, 12 attack, 19 defense, although that'll go away once it takes damage, and 5 damage, and 2 range. So if you need to hit somebody with that hypersonic, and it benefits you to hit them from range, suddenly Johnny Quick can, and it sends out his swing. Incredibly good at the expense of taking a little bit of damage. We'll get to that later, but I've given him the Namor fragment largely because there was nowhere else to put it. You'd think that maybe the Avengers team ability could be used elsewhere, but I will get to that later. Next up, we have Big Bertha. I've talked about her before. No one really plays her. She's definitely easily outwinnable. That's why giving her permanent invulnerability from the Phoenix Force is pretty handy. If you're not outwitting her defense, though, you've got to get through her one hack at a time. And it's a pain, man. She's plasticity, she's locking you down, and she ignores everything but 1, unless, of course, she rolls a 5 or 6, in which case she's ignoring everything, period. So she's a great tie-up. For 56 points, you can hardly ask for any more than shape change plus invulnerability plus that power to ignore virtually everything most of the time, or sometimes ignore everything completely. And, of course, if you do happen to hack through her, she is, of course, paying the magic fragment, so she's got mystics to make you regret having to do it in the first place. And finally, our team deployment relies on Gates. We all know what Gates does. 14 movement phasing, the ability to carry up to 4 characters, and with Bowstring on there, it's a 4-character team. So they really do deploy together. His super duper senses is great for keeping him safe, and of course, invulnerability will extend out his life. He wants to, in the case of this game, or this team certainly, he does, once the initial deployment is out of the way, want to get on to click 2, so he's got his perplex, then uses phasing to get into the face of your opponent and be poisoning. He's not very effective as a pure offense piece, but as a perplex tie-up with poison, he can be a real pain in the nards, to quote 1987 Tom. And he, of course, has the Emma Frost fragment to give him telekinesis. Now, having said all of that, right, so that's the team. I'm attempting to stop sharing, and I'll find out whether it works here. Am I back?
Yeah, I got your face.
Okay. Do you mind if I just take a moment to explain a little bit about how this team kind of works? Great.
What?
Obviously, Gates can carry the whole team out. Big Bertha's great for getting in people's faces and tying them down. And once Gates gets there, they're both there, just there to poison. Any damage they can get through before they die is fine. Mystic's there to feed back again and just generally be annoying, while Bowstring is zipping about, taking shots. Johnny Quick is a harassment piece, but he can also do some big-time damage at the expense of taking damage. At that point, what you really want is a support piece, and of course, that's what Bowstring is for. So if you can get in there, get the big bang off with the hypersonic and get back, then Bowstring can heal you up. Not until the next turn, because of course Johnny takes his damage at the end of the turn. But all the same, I've put together a quick little visual aid. It works as follows. Here we are on screen sharing. You're good?
Yep.
Here we are on turn number 1. These are bad guys over here. BG is for bad guy. And this is the power battery that is on every team that you face. Here are a couple of heavy and light objects, and here's your team, featuring Gates, Big Bertha, Miss Arrowette, Bowstring, and Johnny Quick. On the first team, you all hang out. On the first turn, you're all hanging out together, having a good time. Now, I'm going to stop sharing that and attempt to share turn 2. La, la, la. Back we go. Okay, so here's turn 2. Gates moves everybody out. The gray implies an action token. He moves everybody out, drops everybody off behind these objects. Now, I know what you're thinking. They're going to get dogpiled and attacked. Yeah, probably. But they're trying their best to survive. Let's assume that maybe there's a wall somewhere. And even if there isn't, the nice thing about this team is there's a lot of redundancy. Whoever you take out, someone else is going to be able to take on the offensive role. Unless somebody's hitting you with a huge energy explosion, in which case you're not doing this type of deployment. But presuming you can survive this type of deployment, you have the ability to get into position so that when necessary, Gates can use his TK to throw Johnny Quick forward. That pushes him on to Perplex so that he can Perplex up Johnny Quick's damage. Keep in mind, Johnny Quick's already +1 attack from the Phoenix Force. If he pumps up all of his values, then he can get up to a +3 attack and +3 damage, come in like a bomb, hit somebody, and get all the way back because he was TK'd forward in the first place to be right next to Bowstring. Big Bertha can get into position to grab a heavy object, run in, and base the bad guys. And then from that point forward, you're ready on the next turn for Bowstring to try to heal up Johnny Quick, and for Big Bertha to be up there pushing to do damage or just generally being annoying. And here you are on turn number 3. Happily, Big Bertha's tying down the team. Gates is pushed out, so he's got Perplex. He's using it. Bowstring's going to heal up Johnny Quick. Miss Arrowette is going to start the running shot or the RCE-a-thon for as much damage as she can get, and it's just going to be fun. I'm not saying this particular thing would actually work because we assume that your opponent's going to do something, but it's good to remember you've got the ability to move the whole team out, then manage how everyone's doing their things. So anyway, it just seems like a lot of fun. I like the fact you've got your range combat attacker, your close combat harasser, and potential close combat bomb, tie down, feedback damage with super strength, and a taxi that can double as a poisoner. Sounds like fun to me.
All right. Well, now mine's looking like a piece of crap. Why do I have to go first? I am getting a little feedback from your end, Tom. I'm not sure what's up with that.
I'm not sure either. It's just a microphone. Weird. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll be quiet.
Don't worry. No, I'm hearing me twice, but it seems to have fixed itself, so all's good. So next, my team. Oh, wait. Yep, there it is. All right. So what did I do? I do what I usually do. I went with Miss Arrowette, and I chose a keyword. And now she had 2 keywords, one of which is Golden Age. Star City, for those of you who want to see, we have Speedy, Miss Arrowette, and DC 75th. So
not too many options there.
My options are Speedy and Miss Arrowette. I'll skip for now. So I went with the other one. I went with Celebrity. And Celebrity had a figure I've been meaning to use for a while. Ironmonger. I've wanted to use this guy since he came out.
This is him at 140?
Yeah, I went with him with 140, mostly because at the team I brought him with, the Mastermind version is not ideal.
Right. Okay.
Granted, I see the Stark Industries keyword now, and I'm probably going to be including some of the many Ultron 18.2s I've accumulated ever since the breaking of the Jason Chase curse. That's neither here nor there. Ironmonger is a wild card who takes your team abilities, and I want them. I want them all. Now, granted, they are required to be copyable, but what it means is I take yours, and it's mine now. As well, he also comes with exploit weakness and psychic blast. And if he uses either to target an Iron Man or Tony Stark, he gets +1 damage, or just his damage is +1. Now, granted, that one's going to happen a lot less, but the fact that he has exploit weakness and precision strike gives him quite a few options.
Yes, sir.
If you base me, I'm still doing penetrating damage. If you're at range, I'm doing penetrating damage. Deal with it.
Yep.
Now, he's all right.
That's why he's got that energy dildo coming out of his chest, because he's always penetrating.
Boom. And that is a smile he has under that mask. It does. If you look at it, kind of looks like a bondage mask, eh? Look at that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a dirty figure.
Oh man. So that said, I want to do things with him more than once.
You bet you do. And so you've got one of my favorite figures on your team.
I brought the 70-point Tony Stark. This is a character I've had my eye on since he came out.
Love
And
him.
originally, I had him on an armor keyworded team with the Book of Skulls and Split Lip, and awesomeness ensued. And it was great at first, and then things started happening, and it got worse. It had some pretty bad matchups and some rough games. And generally, I think it was the Iron Pharaoh that showed up to scare the team off. Anyway, he's celebrity as well, and because Ironmonger is an armor-based character, he can use his mind control power in order to, move him around a little bit more. Now, he doesn't get much out of Miss Arrowette, but adding Perplex to Miss Arrowette is perfectly fine if you ask me. And of course, because this team relies a lot on range, I went with my favorite range combat resource in the world, and that is the power plant. This team can't take quite the beating that it can dish out, but adding the power plant to this team added so much beatdown to it. Miss Arrowette with an impact beam is scary. Anybody with an impact beam is scary. Let's not lie. The fact that knockback deals damage on attacks now is brilliant, and the fact that impact beam can deal 3 damage off of a building and penetrating damage off of a building is even better. So I kind of went with my safe resource, a character I really wanted to use and thought would really work well with this team, especially when you think Arrowette doesn't have any improved targeting.
Mm-hmm.
But, the team abilities that stop improved targeting he can take. And that would be like a character like Batman. Now, granted, I still have to deal with stealth, but I'll get around that when I see it.
Yeah. And that Tony Stark's a great addition. I really like that Tony Stark, and I also have been looking. I've been trying to think of whether there's really any effective way to use him as an ID character. It's frustrating that his mind control power starts on click number 2, but for some reason I was always of the impression, and I guess it's a misimpression, that if you blind somebody with an ID card and they took damage, they were removed from the board. I knew that was the last click on the round table, but for some reason I thought it applied to general ID characters too. And the fact that it doesn't has me once again looking at him with Blind Al or him with some other way of dealing 1 damage. Ragdoll.
We discussed while Tom was having technical difficulties.
Or just any way of dealing him bringing him out with an ID card, dealing him 1 damage, and then getting him to get the rest of your armors and robots working. I love friendly mind control so much. It's one of my favorite powers. Mind control is a fun power to begin with. Friendly mind control dominates, and I like the idea of being able to bring it in for 5 points, but you have to find some way of dealing damage to your friendly to really make them work. Still, I think situationally, people will find a way. I mean, obviously, Blind Al is the natural choice, and I think that would be a great way with an arcade team to get a sweet across-the-board Alpha Strike, presuming you were able to win the map roll, is basically at the bring in Tony, Blind Al him, or deal him 1 damage, and get him to friendly mind control somebody across the board so that arcade can attack through that person. It's kind of like the Justin Safert thing, only a discount. And Justin Safert has to choose a Sentinel in advance, whereas this could be used more broadly. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, or behind myself, or beside myself, or something.
You know what?
I'm not myself.
I love that you're brainstorming because it opens up a segue, assuming you're willing to go a little bit longer because we are running a little late. Tom, if you're able to stick around, I want to cover our next topic because you and me are the guys that do this on the team, and I guess we can share a little bit of information with people on it.
Sure. We'll let this round it out.
All right. We're going to wrap it up on this. We have 2 or 3 questions that got added to since the technical difficulties, so we'll just cover those very quickly afterwards. Not very long anyway.
Yep.
So that said,
mm-hmm.
A lot of people ask how we come up with building a team, and the question came up actually during the patron hangout. Our first patron, Michael Fedor, asked, what do you do when you build a team? And I gave him the casual answer. I didn't give him the Meta Lab answer, mostly because my Meta Lab answer is personally problematic.
Right.
It's but myself and Tom, we're known as the guys that come up with a lot of the ideas on the team. Guys come to us to fix their builds, et cetera, et cetera. So we end up being the builders on the team. Now that's not to say that the other guys can't build teams. They build good foundations. We just fix the foundations.
Cool.
And then we come up with weird ideas for ourselves that nobody saw coming, and all of our guys complain, "Why did you come up with that for me?"
Yeah. And then we lose, and they find out why.
Yeah. So Tom,
yes.
As far as building, I'm going to present the question to yourself. Where do you start, and then where do you go from there?
There's a lot of different starting points. I think that one thing that to start my general pontification If I had a general piece of advice, it's don't always be sitting in front of HC Realms. Now, if I had a second piece of advice, it's sit in front of HC Realms if you don't do that already, because the unit section is so useful and there's so much you can do. However, one of the best things I find about coming up with a team idea is just thinking about it while you're in the marketing meeting and not really paying attention. It just occurred to me that all of my coworkers know I'm on this podcast. I hope nobody listens and discovers that I'm actually building teams during the marketing meeting. Anyway, the point is, while I'm sitting in a marketing meeting and I have very little to contribute to the press plan, it's easy for me to consider what do I want to. I often start with counter building, but I like brainstorming. How do you make things better in the abstract? And then you look for specifics. I find that sometimes people jump too quickly to specifics. They specifically say, I want to be able to give this guy invulnerability, so what can give me invulnerability? And they go immediately to entities and resources and just finalize their search. As opposed to starting with the abstract. I want to make this guy harder to hurt. Because from the abstract, you widen out your thinking a little bit and come up with more options that can take you down some paths you've never thought to think of. And ask questions like, are there any pieces that ignore, or like, what are the pieces that have a stop click? Like, what are they all? I'm just going to, then you go back to HC Realms, do a search for special powers, includes the phrase stop turning, and you just click through all the things that come up. But I like the idea of starting with, I like the idea personally of starting with specific counter building of something that you'd say, okay, well, I want to build against Nick Fury. Because I find that as a starting point for ideas, they'll guide you in a completely other direction eventually, or often they will, but they'll guide you in a direction that winds up being more inclusive and more interesting and takes you to places you'd never have come up with if you started from simply the premise, I like this character, I want to build with it. I find it more interesting to say, how am I going to deal with a character that can see me just about anywhere and turn one of my powers off? And you start thinking, well, I can try to block his line of fire. I can start by having more than one figure that with a redundancy in place, so if he takes something away, there's another source of that power, etc. Come up with a potential solution, and then start thinking, what are the weaknesses and strengths of this foundation? Add elements that will make them stronger, and elements that will cancel their weaknesses, and see what you come up with, and then say, what beats this? And if it's a lot of things, start trying to tweak it and modify it so that you're so that you're cutting off some of the things that would counter it, because it will wind up taking you in very strange directions. You'll end up with a team that has no resemblance to the team you started with, but you just keep on asking the question, what do I want to beat, and what beats what I've come up with? And then you revise and you spin and you revise and you spin, and you keep thinking about these ideas in the abstract and working towards a more specific solution. So I know it sounds a bit abstract when I'm talking about it, but as far as a way of building teams, as opposed to just saying, I like Lady Thor, so I want to build a Lady Thor team, or I think Nighthawk Prime is the nuts, so I want to make a Nighthawk Prime team. Think, what is a thing, you want to, I'm seeing a lot of shape change. What's a team that builds around countering shape change? Battle Fury is a good start, so what's a good Battle Fury option? What can I combine to make that option better, and go from there? That's why I personally advocate for counter building not as the end result of your creative process, but as the beginning, because I find it a very useful and interesting beginning to think, what can I build against this specific thing? Because more often than not, by the time you finish the exercise, you've got something that actually deals with a lot of different things, and also has its own merit. And if you don't, you throw it away and you go back to the drawing board and try again. But that's a method that I find works really well for me, personally.
All right. So now the reason I mentioned mine was problematic, I've probably made this comment several times. Some of my best ideas didn't start as the best idea. In fact, I set up a whole, just to visualize. Okay, I got a stack of really, really good on paper ideas. This idea looks like it makes sense. Didn't work. This idea looks like it's going to make sense. Didn't work. These ideas look like they're going to make, nope, none of them worked. All right, I'm out. I quit. What am I doing? What am I doing? And then I come back, and I'm like, you know what? I need a game to relax. I need something to do. I'm going to try this idea because I made a joke about it. And then that ends up being my team. I have 2 examples in my 2 trips to nationals. Trip 1 to nationals, I was thinking of net decking, and then I said no, I can't net deck because I'm going to screw this up. So we got Amber onto a team, and eventually it took a while, but then we started practicing myself, and then I was building ideas and building another idea, and I was building another idea, and my buddy had just handed me over a 10th anniversary Batman, the 63.1, and I was like, this is a really good figure, but he lacks move and attack. Months later, or about a month or 2 earlier, Fear Itself just ended. We had a resource that gave everybody a move and attack. This Batman's a lot better. What's this trait? Well, he can turn into another figure. Hey, this other Batman's not too bad, and I can see how it can situationally be pretty decent. And then I was like, wait a second. All the 10th anniversary figures have this, and all these 10th anniversary figures could really use these powers. You know what would be funny is if I made use of the 10th anniversary figures and tried to turn them and tried to promote them. Because one of the things about promoting these figures is you've got to be hitting your opponent and dealing damage. Well, okay, so already I'm winning, and the bonus is I turn them into bigger figures or higher point figures, higher value. And this is where originally the idea of increasing the value of the board came to my head. So from there, it was like, all right, so what are the figures that are really good, could use a move and attack, and I can make effective use of? So then I found the Storm, and then I found the Captain America, and I found these figures. I was like, can this functionally work in the game that exists right now? Well, for one thing, a lot of the time there was individual figures that were really standing out. At the time that we had the Fire Pharaoh and the Bullseye were the big ones to deal with. I had enough figures on my team, and all of them individually actually ran very well once I got their Book of Skulls hammer. I could just be darting across the board, and they can individually handle themselves to enough of a degree to play. And all this started as a joke. All this started with a joke that began as frustration. And frustration is actually my best friend. Losing and getting beat with teams that should be winning is equal parts my friend and my enemy. The police team came from the frustration of not being able to run anything. And I looked at one, and I started that team with the Central City Police captain. I said, what characters have the police keyword? I completely forgot Banshee had the police keyword. So I was like, oh, Banshee's cool. I'm going to add Banshee to this team. And then I found out Rocket Raccoon had the police team. I was like, wait, Rocket's got police? Okay. And I remembered Cerise, like, I'm adding Cerise to this team because I got a ton of range. Forget it. That one actually came naturally to me. And then I was like, now I need a resource on this team. Initially, I was going to go with the green battery. Patrick Iboko talked me out of it and went with the power plant. And I was like, yeah, I got a power plant. 6 rings. Okay, I can make 6 rings work. And you know what? I made 6 rings work very functionally. And this is a team that actually performed better on day 1 than my day 2. And this is where my confidence issue comes in. Now, Tom says I'm at my best when I'm my most confident. I am at my best gaming at my most confident. I am at my best building at my least confident. I need to be broken for months and weeks on end. And I need to have ideas just destroyed and demolished. And the second that's happened, I will come up with a stupid joke team that I just need to relax and run and just goof around with. And all of a sudden it beats 3 teams that are major in the meta. Now,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was just going to tangent off a little bit just to say another, because we're talking about starting points for building teams. Another starting point that comes to mind, because I use it a lot, so much so that you've actually identified it specifically about me, which is surprising because I didn't ever think about that it was enough of a pattern to identify. The Heroclix is very much a game about the new hotness, because ultimately Heroclix is both a game and an addiction. And the nature of the addiction is that you get obsessed with your last hit. So yeah, exactly. There you go. So just like we spent a bunch of this cast, just like the last cast and the one before, talking about Nick Fury, both the set and specifically the figure, and Nighthawk Prime and stuff, because these things are new. And the newest thing is often the scariest thing. It's what everybody's doing. As another good starting point for building, I find, as soon as we all start talking about this new thing, we all stop talking about the thing that came just before it. And in a lot of cases, we don't stop talking about that thing that came before it because it's not good or because it's been replaced, but because it feels like old news compared to this new thing that everybody's talking about. There's a lot of good you can find in the stuff that was just a little bit earlier than the stuff everyone's talking about now. And so I say go back a set or two or three and see what are the things that everybody was talking about and then suddenly just dried up. That worked very well for me with Jenny Sparks at Canadian Nationals. It was one of those figures that everybody kept talking for a while, like we're going to see Jenny Sparks, we're going to see Jenny, and then no one did. And then suddenly the topic turned to other things. And when Kenny started dominating with his Don't Die team, that was very vulnerable to Jenny Sparks. That just didn't seem like anybody was taking up the gauntlet to make Jenny Sparks work as a counter to that. And so that's what I did at Canadian Nationals. As it was, I never actually faced any version of that team at Canadian Nationals. But again, like I was saying earlier, you start with a specific example, you build for the specific example, and you find that it often opens up doors that wind up making it effective against a lot more than you thought it would. And that was a great example. The team for Windsor was much the same. I mean, I built a team specifically designed to give Johnny Quick precision strike and the ability to deal 6 damage and cross the board in one turn. That's obviously really good, but I didn't do it just because it's really good. I did it specifically to beat Brother Voodoo and Prime Captain Marvel because they were both 6 clicks long and had super senses. So I said I want to give him precision strike and deal 6 damage so that I can cross the board and deal with those 2 trouble figures. Even if it means losing Brother Voodoo or Johnny Quick in the process, those figures like that enough different teams hinge their strategy on their survival that if I can take that out on the first turn, then I can do cleanup with the rest of the team. And I wound up, it was a good example of me not thinking it through fully because I wound up designing a team that worked effectively. And I just went in thinking the only thing I really don't want to face is Zombie Super Skrull. And that's all I faced in Windsor. And I never faced a Johnny Quick that I could do that on, except I think yours. You were playing Johnny too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the only game I was able to pull off the design him to do 6 damage in one shot thing was when I pulled it off against you. I never faced a Brother Voodoo. I never faced a Captain Marvel. I never faced a Banshee who was also 6 clicks long and had super senses. And there was lots of all those characters. There was lots of them at the time. I just never got the pairing. But again, I was counter building something, but I found it by looking one generation back in the case of Proxima Midnight, which is the rest of that team. And there's a lot of good things you can find by just looking at what were people talking about before they started talking about this new thing. Because often that conversation, it didn't deserve to end when it did.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I do the same thing. I'm not gonna lie. I do go back and say, hey, this is a figure that's problematic, but is there something that already exists that can be dealing with this? I came to the same Jenny Sparks conclusion that you did, but none of the teams that I put together really functioned well. But one of my big problems is that I don't have the ability to put an entity on my team. I don't know why. I have them all. I love them all. They're beautiful.
I know, it's great. I borrow them all the time.
Exactly. But I can never functionally put a team together where I look at it and go, that 25 points needs to be put into this figure to make them better. Because I look at it and say, well, I can spend that 25 points on that, or I can spend 25 points elsewhere and make more figures better in the way I see it in some cases. I'll put a Central City cop at 25 points on because I can get 2 characters to attack at your defense being -1.
Yep.
So that's where my brain will go. And maybe this year before they leave, I will build a team that makes functional use of it. It'll probably include Nick Fury because he does have that cosmic keyword, and it'll probably include some other cosmic characters because I just insist on winning the map roll. One of the things about my builds as well is I do like to maximize all the possible bonuses that I can get. If I can get a keyword together, I want to make sure I get the maximum, or I want to make sure I get the map roll and make sure my team can actually function on that map roll. If the map roll isn't something my team needs, I don't try to maximize that. Where if I don't have probability control, it has to get on this team. So it's time to either make it a name theme team or it's time to start throwing some probbers on there, just dedicated probability control. Yep. And that's generally where the direction my builds go is I maximize the possible possibilities. This is the best way I can describe it. Do what I can when I can, as much as I can.
And the other thing that I would say as a starting point for building teams, just because this falls into the category of things I wish somebody had told me when I first started playing Heroclix, which we talked about before. But it's, if you really like something, maybe it's a certain way of building a team, maybe it's a certain figure, maybe it's a certain resource, maybe it's a certain game effect. If you really like it, go with it for two reasons. Number one, it's fun, and ultimately we're supposed to be playing a game that we enjoy doing. We shouldn't get so up in our head about competition and stuff that we wind up competing at the expense of having a good time. The first time you've ever sat down with a team, you didn't like it, it didn't feel right to you, but you decided to play it because you thought it might do well. You've made a mistake, and it's very obvious. When I played Faust, I felt this way. I won that tournament feeling terrible about myself the whole way through, and realized I would never play Faust again. Because it just wasn't for me. It was something I didn't like. On the other hand, though, I love the Beyonder. I love him so much. He is my favorite figure probably ever made. And I'm not going to say he's the best figure ever made, but I will continue to try to find any way that I can to use him. And I found ways of using him more effectively, at least, than a lot of other people that I've talked to have thought of, or at least they came to the conclusion at the same time or a little later. Because I love him so much that I want to be able to use him more often. And when you really love something, you usually are in its head. So you can usually use the thing that you love better than someone else because you've got that extra bit of effort and that extra bit of psychological space devoted to it because you like it. So if you like something, go with that feeling. It's not just irrelevant. You don't just go with what's most effective regardless of how you feel about it. If you feel strongly about something, you'll tend to play better with it. And so it's often better to use the figure that you like instead of the figure that you feel might be more effective, because you'll make the figure that you like effective, and you'll find some way to fuck it up with the figure that you feel you should be playing, but you hate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes what's fun for you ends up not being fun for your opponent, and you got to know when to use it and when not to use it. Know that Nighthawk Prime is appropriate at an ROC, at a nationals level, but at a local tournament where everybody's kind of the build. You can look at a lot of builds and go, time to play fun. Leave him at home.
Yeah, leave Post at home. Leave your orange battery at home.
It's okay for things to be good. Sometimes when they're really good, know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
True.
Anyway.
Cool.
Yeah, so that you got into the Minds of Madness, which if our Patreon hits that point, you'll get to hear a lot more often, but more in action than anything else.
Less in the abstract and more in practice. That'd be fun.
Yeah. So I'm hoping we can get that show together soon. Check it out, patreon.com/marriedwithclicks. We've hit our top 2 goals. Time for our next goal to get another show with the Meta Lab. I'm tentatively calling practice night.
Nice.
So now we go to the last few questions that I didn't answer from the beginning of the show when we were having technical difficulties, and we're going long, so these should all be quick. Actually, it looks like there's only 2 questions here that are brand new. So first off, McConnell Lamar asks, if you could make a set from any property, DC, Marvel, or other, what would it be?
Go ahead.
Me? I don't want. They already made all my stuff.
What are we defining as a property here?
You know what? It says Marvel, DC, or other, and it's the other that I get a little wacky on, because we've got Nickelodeon clicks on the way. I guess that falls under another. You can go deep into. Pick anything you can make into a click. Just call it, I guess, that you want.
Okay. That is very wide open. And yet it's true. We've gotten so much that is so good. I guess one thing that comes to my mind is Earth X. It is Marvel, but we've really never seen any Earth X stuff, and I really liked both the Earth X, Universe X, and Paradise X arc. It was mired in continuity, but I think it was a fascinating look at a weird alternate future of the Marvel universe that tied together some really disparate plot threads in some really interesting ways. So I think it would be cool to see Earth X clicks.
Myself, I'm going to step away from comics because they treat me so well lately. And I'm going to go into the realm of video games. And I'm going as far as saying we saw Dota 2, and I wish we could have seen more of that. I'm not sure what happened with that, but it would have been awesome to see more Dota 2. But a Dota-like game just recently came out that happens to have all my favorite characters from my favorite video game company. So I'm going to say, give me a Heroes of the Storm set one day. If I was to make a set, it would be Heroes of the Storm because it's got all the Blizzard characters. Everything goes nuts. And, everything about those characters is just absolutely awesome. You got big, like the Space Marines are in gigantic armor, and you got the Devil is one of the characters, and his demons are characters, and bug monsters, and tanks and knights. Like it's so all over the place that it just as its own set would be so awesome, and it would look brilliant. So
yeah, that would be crazy fun.
Yeah. So that if I was to say any kind of property and any kind of thing, give me a Heroes of the Storm, and if it was my choice.
Yeah.
Hey. Talk to Blizzard, guys. NECA?
I would just say bring back Heroclix, but make it better. Like Heroclix was fun, but it wasn't my favorite for a few different reasons. But I feel like with a few minor tweaks, it would be pretty awesome. Anyway, consider thanks. Let's stick with it.
I do agree, and me and Amber were the only ones in our area that played the game, and we got all the sets and everything, and we do miss that game every so often, but space needed to be given. Shane Donnie asks another question. I believe there's one Colossal that has not yet been seen for Superman Wonder Woman. Is anyone else hoping it would be Mogo?
I can easily speak to this one because I don't know the DC universe well enough to be able to say. So I don't know. I always want Imperiex because he's so silly looking. But other than that, I don't know. If you want Mogo, then I want him for you.
Mogo's more appropriate as a map, like Krakoa, because Mogo's a planet. If you ask me,
is that like Mojo? Are they related? Mojo the Living Planet and that?
No, Mojo was the factory
Ego,
that ran Mojoverse. Yeah, you think Ego. Mogo is a Green Lantern who's also a living planet.
Huh.
Kind of. I guess this is along the same idea.
That's a little too big for a Colossal figure.
Yeah. And you guys keep picking on me. There was one that hasn't been seen, and I've been talking about Camo since they said Colossals.
Camo actually seems likely. It has the benefit of being one I've heard of, not just from you.
Yeah. But Camo. That's who I want it to be.
Conclusion, Camo.
I wouldn't complain about Mogo. Well, I'd complain to a certain degree because they just gave me a basketball in a box. But Camo.
Yeah.
Plus, we could also get two smaller Colossals. Remember Galactic Guardians? We got that one box that had the Dormammu and the Watcher. So we could see, a Camo and Plasmus. Just saying.
Cool.
When did that happen? So out of nowhere, we just hit 1,200 subscribers.
Woo!
On the dot. Wow. Awesome. Channel's still growing.
Everybody.
Remember when we were excited about the 1,000? Every time we're on the Metal Lab, we hit a milestone. We hit 1,000 on the Metal Lab, and now we hit 1,200 on the Metal Lab. So thank you guys, all you guys who watch and are now subscribing. We appreciate all the support.
That's great news.
Absolutely. So I guess that's it for the night. We got pretty late with all technical difficulties, but me and Tom are the voices of the show that will go on forever if not stopped. And I do have to get some sleep, and we both have jobs. So, Tom, if there's nothing else you want to talk about?
It's been a tremendous pleasure.
It has been a wonderful pleasure, Tom. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you guys who are watching for joining me and sticking around through the second part of our unfortunateness today. That said, I got to remind you guys, we are brought to you in part by HC Realms, so check out their shop at realmsgaming.com. Use coupon code MARY to get yourself 10% off and to forward the support to our channel. We do get a little kickback, and we can add some stuff to some prizing for some events if you like. I like how I added a little dance in that while I'm trying to access something else for a quick screen share. And as well, guys, don't forget our Patreon, patreon.com/marriedwithclicks. We have hit 2 of our milestones, which is, we got awesome editing software, and you've seen it in the videos. Amber has been having a ton of fun with it. And now it's my turn to do the competitive breakdown show that we've actually recently filmed, and we should be getting out by next month. We're really looking forward to that one. So next goal is practice night. let's get practice night up and running, guys, because after that, it's new cameras and tripods for a couple months, and then we get this Married with Clicks tournament series up and running. And I've already got an awesome format that's very player-focused for it. I just have to run some test tournaments for it to really get it going. And, you know, at your own levels, give us $1 or as low as $1 gets you a whole bunch of access to our updates. The patron hangout, which this coming month, and I'm going to be putting out a notice to all our patrons, is October 2nd, I believe, is the Friday. Yep, October 2nd will be our next patron hangout. And anything higher than that gets you in that, including the $5 level, where you get a downloadable version of all of our non-live videos. A $10 subscription will get you an action token, which we're going to be having made shortly. Right now, the level of patrons we have, we can't justify ordering them yet. $25 gets you to be mine and Amber's team builder for a month. And it looks like we have one for me and one for Amber next month.
Sweet.
So I can't wait. I can't wait to see what we get out of that. And if you get the $50 a month, or even for a month, if you choose to jump in on $50, you will get to do either mine or Amber's team and jump on the show with myself and the rest of the MetaLab crew if they should decide to show up.
I really liked watching the game with the team that your patron provided. That was fun. It was too bad that Amber rolled so badly.
Yeah. Did you watch we actually just we're about to, spoiler alert. Haha.
Yeah.
I just realized that one's not up, but it's only up for the patrons yet. We do have another one coming up in a couple hours. As a matter of fact, it's supposed to be up in 2 hours. That another patron build where I get to use the patron build, and I don't think he had enough confidence in his team, to say the least. Either that or I've increased his confidence in his team.
Yes, and your rolls weren't quite so treacherous?
No.
Well, look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it's an exciting game, and it will be posted in a couple of hours. So, actually, I'm probably going to unlock it now. You know what? I'm doing it right now as I say goodbye, guys. Have a good night. And remember, practice makes your team better. Have a good night, folks.